This is recent and very petty but great. My friend keeps a very clean yard. In the fall he likes to get all the leaves before it rains and they become a bitch to pull up. His neighbor doesn't care about his yard as he has owned the house for a few years and still has not moved in. He lives a few states away. As my friend was finishing up sucking up the leaves with his machine, some of them blew into the neighbor's driveway way. Maybe 20 leaves total. My friend finished up and went inside. About 20 minutes later there was a knock on the door and squad car outside. The officer said they received a complaint about leaves being blown into the driveway. The neighbor had been watching on his doorbell cam and decided this transgression warranted police intervention. You could tell the officer was visibly annoyed as my friend asked the officer to look at his yard and then his neighbor's. The pettiness. The neighbor had an old car shipped and dropped in the driveway about 8 months ago where it has sat ever since. Remember, he still lives a few states away. While my friend told the officer he would clean the leaves promptly, he asked the officer if he could do him a favor. Check the car for proper tags. The officer saw the car in question and gave a slight smile. While my friend cleaned the leaves out of the driveway, then officers were walking around the car looking at the VIN and running information. You could hear the neighbor on his doorbell asking what the problem was. There is a law: any car that is in the driveway must have tags and insurance on them. The police gave him a call and told him his car was in violation and he either needed to put the car in the garage, which would need to be lifted and dropped in the garage, or get the registration, insurance, and an e-check on the car that can't be driven taken care of within 2 weeks, or they will be back to tow the car and ticket him. Dude cost himself a 10-hour car ride to get his car lifted and stuffed in the garage all over. A few dead leaves. I recently had an emergency appendectomy, and recovery has been slow. I had to take time off from my own athletics, but worse, from coaching in the kids' sports program I'm involved with. The experience made me step back and realize I really built my whole identity around being active and healthy, so the hit my physical abilities took as a result of being sick plus the healing process has made me feel lost. I've been working to regain the joy I used to experience from exercise, without going, oh, you used to be so much faster with that, or your technique used to be so much stronger, or you don't fit in anymore, or whatever else, and just enjoy myself regardless of the level I'm at. But ironically, the anxiety about not being able to do what I used to has made regaining those abilities difficult. It made me self-conscious about exercising in public spaces, but I was starting to finally get over it as friends convinced me the source of the concerns were all in my head. There's no way to get back to it other than training, so despite the anxiety I started running again, as soon as the doctors approved it. I went to the local track and just did a few slow laps each morning, building up speed every few days, and I've only just been authorized to add some sprints and body weight strength training to the mix. Occasionally there were other people at the track, but I didn't really notice because I run with headphones on and try to zone out in these lighter sessions. But little did I know my friends were wrong. It was not all in my head, I was being watched, and more than that, I was being judged. My absolute catastrophe level worst nightmare at this stage of building back my strength and speed. On Friday I was setting up for practice at the kids program and the head coach asked me into his office because a parent had a complaint. A parent I didn't know too well, Karen, was there and he said she had specific complaints about me. The meeting almost didn't happen because of Karen's initial refusal to put on a mask, required in our facilities for now, but eventually her desire to tell on me for whatever she thought she had me on overrode her freedoms to infect everyone. I was a bit nervous, as anyone is being called to meet with their boss over a complaint, but I figured it was a classic case of my kid should start more, or I know my kid tried out as a midfielder but I want her to switch to defense, that kind of rules don't apply to me thing. But instead, I sit down in the office, and Karen is playing my boss a video of me running on the track. That she filmed from afar. It's surrounded by stadium-style risers. I was horrified, both because no one is ever totally used to seeing themselves on video, and because I was just embarrassed about how slow I was. But most importantly because Y was a virtual stranger, I'd met her personally maybe 4 times, ever, filming me while I ran on my own time at a private facility. She then went on to explain that her 8-year-old son, one of the players on my squad, was lapping me in the video and insisting the coaches need to hold themselves to higher athletic standards than the young players if they want to prepare them for college teams. Again, her son is 8. Apparently her son would sometimes be running on the track while her older child was practicing on a nearby field. I never noticed, the kid is still relatively new, and I don't pay much attention to the other people on the track. My boss patiently but firmly explained to Karen that my physical abilities are not the parents' concern and all personnel are closely managed by the head coaches who understand each unique situation and what's appropriate, and that her son wouldn't be impacted. Karen then went on to say my being out of shape was probably connected to why I'd been taking so much time off lately. Technically yes, it is because I was in the hospital. And complaining that the personnel changeover isn't good for the kids. My boss again reiterated that the head coaches hadn't changed or taken any time off and that I was still one of the most skilled in the area I instruct, so this was not her concern. She asked if there was someone else she could speak to, but he explained that he was the owner and founder of this program, so no, there was not. I knew my boss was intentionally avoiding saying what had happened to me or even alluding to a health issue, to protect my privacy, but I figured maybe being transparent with her would show her how ridiculous she was being, and keep her tuition dollars in our program during a difficult time for sports clubs. But when I explained, she just turned to the boss and said, well, maybe you should furlough her until she's healed and bring on a healthy coach in the meantime, because my son needs someone out there who can keep up with him. My boss respected what I was trying to do but made clear we weren't going further with that strategy to avoid setting a precedent of sharing coaches' personal circumstances. Telling her why people take time off or what their health status may be is not her concern because the program manages that and makes appropriate decisions. She kept kicking up a fuss, but the coach finally told her he had to get back out on the field, back to her son and everyone else's kids. She started physically leaving, but continued fussing about how she was not satisfied and would not be recommending us to other parents. Pro tip: not the way to conduct yourself with the people who make recommendations to scouts concerning family culture/team interaction. The coach wasn't preparing to leave. Instead, he stopped her in her tracks to tell her if she was found to be surveilling or otherwise harassing any staff members again, she would be permabanned from the program, no games or practices, no team social events, no presence in our buildings, and no clemency. So, that was pretty satisfying. Her son is a good, average kid, and I'm glad the consequences were focused on booting her out rather than limiting his opportunities to have fun playing. So then we went out and had a great, happy, safe practice. This was still a pretty upsetting event for me personally though, and I'll never unsee that discouraging video of me running, but it was ultimately reassuring to know the other staff have my back. Leaving Karen in the dust is just another step on my road to recovery. Edit, reading comments between breaks from schoolwork, but the outpouring of support and commisery has meant so much, thank you all. I, F28, have a very overprotective mother. I also travel a lot for work. Well, my job had me coming into town so my mom could see me. I had a meeting after at the time I said I was done and texted her. She kept calling me during the whole meeting, despite me sending a message that I couldn't talk because I was in a meeting. When I'm finally done and about to call her, another coworker tells me that my mom is looking for me. She had came down to the place I was working, wandering the outside looking for me. When I called her, she said she was in tears and worried over me. The next day she asks if she can install an app to track my cell phone. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable with that and had hoped she would leave it at, but she kept pushing it until I said no. She keeps trying to coax me into getting it, saying things like I'll use it for emergencies. I said that was a slippery slope and I know her and it's going to reach a point where just emergencies turn into full-blown tracking my every movement. She also argued that she's getting better at not being so protective because she's going to therapy, and I told her how about she asks her therapist what they think about her tracking me. At this point she keeps bringing it up and I'm growing tired. I'm wondering I should give in and put an end to harassment. But at the same time I feel like that's enabling her. I don't know what to do anymore to put an end to this. This was couple years ago, but I can't get it out my head, so I thought I'd share here. Okay, to start with story. My family lived across the country back then, so I would usually buy a flight to get there. Well, this was during the holidays, so everything was backed up and there was a lot of storms. So when I got to my first layover, my flight was cancelled and they couldn't get in their system to get me a hotel, so I slept on the airport floor that night clutching all my bags. By the time I got onto the plane, I had spent 24 hours in the airport. Luckily for this flight, I had booked first class. So I get on the plane and get comfy, and I'm just so happy that I'll be home soon after the last couple days I had. When a really nice flight attendant comes over and points at the empty seat next to me and mine. And tells me a mother forgot to book her toddler ticket and she was wondering if they could take my seat. And the empty seat next to me. I told that I'm sorry, but I've had a really long day and I paid extra for this, I would like to stay. The flight attendant was very nice and said no problem. But she let the woman come sit in the empty seat next to me with her toddler on her lap. She immediately looks at me with a scowl and says, I can't believe you wouldn't trade your seat for a kid, and simply tell her, ma'am, I paid extra for this seat, you should have booked him a ticket, this isn't my fault. Then she keeps going off saying things under breath, and to her toddler like I can't hear her. And then she tells her kid to make the most noise he can do whatever he wants, and she keeps saying things to me, and I can't believe this entitled woman. I finally lash out and said, will you shut the fuck up? I'm not proud of myself for this, but with the last couple days I didn't care anymore. But my common sense came back and I apologized for swearing in front of her kid. Even though I heard her call me a bitch and many other words. Again, the women wouldn't shut up. And finally my savior came. That really nice flight attendant came over and bent down to the woman's level and said, ma'am, you were lucky to be able to switch seats, and all I've heard from you since you switched is you threatening this woman and telling your child to be noisy. This plane hasn't left yet and we have no problem kicking you off this flight, and if continue to do this while we're in the air you will be banned. I couldn't help but smile. She finally shut up and I was so glad that I had downloaded Sex Life on Netflix so I could finish my steamy show right in front of her. Edit. For people asking, I'm assuming the child was under the age of 2, just a big baby. If your child is under 2 you can fly with them on your lap, instead buying them a seat ticket. I'm assuming this what the women did and was hoping she'd get an extra seat. I hope that clears some things up. Sorry. Edit 2. For those asking, I'm guessing most people on the plane came from a cancelled flights as well. The plane was smaller than the last plane I was originally supposed to go on. I don't know if that was the reason she needed a seat for her kid or not. I don't know why they didn't just switch the grandma to first class, but I'm guess the flight attendant asked if one of them wanted to switch and the mom was the one who took the opportunity. Again, I don't know if this was the thought process, but it makes the most sense to